Welcome to the Cybersecurity and Cloud Podcast, the podcast where we learn from cybersecurity experts how to stay safe, private, and secure on the cloud and in code. CSCP is hosted by Francesco Cipollone, your cybersecurity friend with a passion for all things cyber and sharing stories of other professionals with you. Let's dive in.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Cybersecurity and Cloud Podcast. Today, we continue our adventure on DevSecOps, on agreeing and disagreeing with a good friend of mine that we had a long discussion about this topic, and we said, this is a perfect topic to go on a podcast, and hence why we're doing the podcast today. So I'd like to welcome everybody, and today we have as a fabulous guest, Larry. I'm going to try to do it in English and then in Italian, Maccherone, and then in Italian for friends, it's Maccherone. That's the ex-CISO of Comcast. He has done a series of RSA talks. That's how we start getting together on how to measure everything in DevSecOps and what is the feedback on that I really, really like. And then we start a very interesting conversation that I'd like everybody to hear, hence the podcast. But before further ado, Larry, welcome to the show.
Frank, thanks for having me. I'm super glad to be here.
Brilliant. And Larry, for who doesn't know you, how did you get involved into cybersecurity? How did you grow into this crazy field?
It's an interesting path because I was a serial entrepreneur. I started my first business while I was still an undergrad at Virginia Tech, studying electrical engineering, and we did process controls. Our biggest client was GE Power Generation. So at one point, we were producing controls for machines that were generating 60% of the world's power. So if there was a vulnerability in something we had done, then the bad guys could literally bring down the world's power grid. And so we had to assure that we were producing essentially defect-free software, because way back then, I actually sort of came to the conclusion that security is an attribute of quality, and you can't have high security software. The software can't be highly secure unless it's also got very high levels of quality. And so defect-free vulnerability is just a particular kind of defect. So we realized that capability, the ability to produce essentially vulnerability and defect-free software, was something that a lot of people wanted. So my second company was a spin out of that, and we packaged that up as a product that we sold, a software and consulting product that we sold. And then Carnegie Mellon got wind of this framework and said, come to Carnegie Mellon. Carnegie Mellon University is where, for those of you that don't know, is where the Software Engineering Institute is, where a lot of the best software engineering research in the world is going on. And I went there because I wanted to help change the world. And I was the founding director of this thing called the Scilab there. And we spun out a framework called Build Security In, which was essentially the framework I had packaged up before for my first startup. And that's how I got into cybersecurity. The bad news is that our Build Security In initiative failed to take off. And the government gave us a lot of money to try to make it take off, and it never really took off. And I actually left cybersecurity for 10 years, and I didn't come back to it until DevOps gave me the opportunity to come back. And DevOps, I think, is the best way to build security in. And so I'm trying again with the DevSecOps phrase to build security in.
Well, I guess we're all trying very hard to bring quality back to cybersecurity, or rename cybersecurity into code quality or software quality. I think that's a very, very fitting terms, because good software, good quality software, it doesn't have vulnerability. It has a pass test against low number of vulnerability. Then back on the topic, what is your view right now of the state of the art of where we are with this kind of new initiative that is not that new anymore, that is DevOps, and then the more advanced version is DevSecOps? Where do you think we are as an industry overall?
Well, I think if you look at sort of the trajectory of where we are on a curve of getting to late majority on DevOps, we haven't even crossed the chasm yet, so to speak. We're still early adopter stage, I think, especially in the enterprise for DevOps. There's pretty much every team you meet likes to refer to themselves as doing DevOps, but they're not doing true DevOps, in my opinion. If you aren't automatically gating via quality functional testing in your pipeline before the pull request, the merge decision on the pull request, then you're not really doing DevOps. Everything, all the advanced DevOps techniques actually sort of build upon that automated functional testing. And if you don't have that, you're not doing true DevOps. And a lot of teams claim they're doing DevOps and they don't have that. So we're pretty early on. I think most of them want it, though. I think most of them realize that and want to do it.
Right. And I guess the way I see a little bit this word is there are business priority, and sometimes DevOps is misleadingly seen as blocking business priority because it's like gating, it's quality software. But it's a perception shift, I think, that we need to do with a lot of organizations, that DevOps actually enables and accelerates business decision, because when you have a good foundation and a good flow and pipeline, pushing more code in, you kind of have those timers and those automation embedded. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard sometimes for non-programmers to get this. But by the way, I'm a coder. I write code every day. I'm the primary author of a dozen open source projects, one of which gets 1 million downloads a month. So a big project, very popular project. The reality is that you can get both speed, velocity, and quality if you do it right. But the perception is amongst business people is that it's a trade-off, that if you slow down to get high quality, then you're slowing down. And that is actually a little bit true if you've built a lot of code without that. So it's best to start with a clean slate and build the code with testing right from the start. But if you don't have that, you are going to have spend a little getting the code tested. And the reason you get extra speed is, and this is the part that's really hard for non-developers to get. The reason you get extra speed is that if you want to make a change to the product, and 99% of the product's life is in change, in add-ons. The first thing you ship is like, it becomes 1% of the functionality eventually, or the 1% of the code. Then other 99% comes later. That might be a little hyperbolic, but so everything is change. So you have to optimize for the ability to quickly make change. The tests enable you to make changes with confidence. If you make a change over here, it doesn't break something over there. Or that if you make a change over here and it is going to break something over there, then it will show you immediately. And so you can then evaluate, this change broke 20 things over here. Let's try a different approach over here. That only broke 3 things over here. Let's go with that approach. And so it gives you this ability to confidently make change.
Right. And I really like what you just said, that is making changes with confidence, because that really built the case of a solid foundation. But then on the other side, you have all the startup, the VC world that really push for getting featuring things out as quick as possible and revenue generating as quick as possible, considering where we are, especially right now. How do we help, especially startup, on building secure software? Because we have the secure startup that maybe are doing the initial step, but 99% of software is written by non-security professional, and startup don't generally have the fund to get a security professional in. So how do we help also those organizations getting ahead? Because that's the code that we will inherit 5 years down the line, right?
Yeah, you got to do it gradually if you have an existing code base and existing team's maturity, and that's pretty much everywhere. So you have to provide a gradual improvement ramp and coach, get them on that improvement ramp, get them to commit to improving 1 to 3 things every 90 days. That's the term I use. And the word things I replaced with practices, and I have a definition of what a practice is. But I have a whole framework for how you get people to change, how you get whole organizations to change. And this is the framework that I use to do agile transformations, and then DevOps transformations, and then DevSecOps transformations. And I used it at Comcast, which for European folks is a telecommunications conglomerate, owns Sky, for instance, and European folks are probably familiar with Sky. as well as Universal Studios and a bunch of other things. So 10,000 developers, 600 development teams in the organization. By the time I left, we had essentially replaced the old way of doing AppSec with this DevSecOps approach, where development teams owned the security of their own products. And not every team was doing it at a high level of maturity when I left. I left because I knew we had created the program, but we had gotten commitment and we'd shown with data measurement that you were able to get 1/6 as many vulnerabilities in production with 1/4 the effort on the security team side, at least 1/4 the cost. And so that's a 24x ROI. So like, okay, let's get rid of the old way of doing AppSec and go to this new one because it's a 24x ROI. And we did it. It was hard though at first because it broke a lot of the mindsets that a lot of security people have, this gating, policing, auditing, guardrails kind of mindset. And that's hard. That's really hard.
I really like a couple of things you said that I think resonate a lot with what I've seen as well in the field. That is a maturity model or a maturity evolution that you can't just simply go and smash a team and say, tomorrow you be DevSecOps or tomorrow you be completely agile and we remove all the control and then you see developer panicking or security folk in that particular case panicking. And the other stuff that I really love is measurement and measuring everything. Why do you think measurement are so key and fundamental to any kind of transformation or any kind of control transformation, I would say?
Yeah, I'm cautious about the use of the word control. The way you used it there, I'm fine with, but I have a little bit of a look. That's a sidebar. We can maybe get back to that about control. But why measurement? Well, first of all, there's a way to do measurement wrong. I actually have a slide deck. It's one of my most popular talks. It's the 7 deadly sins of measurement, software engineering measurement. And, the first sin, and this is sort of like the meta sin, is essentially using metrics to try to directly manipulate behavior. And so, and it's a subtle difference between, well, wait a second, you ask the metrics are for manipulating behavior. No, they're not for manipulating behavior. They're for providing feedback to someone or some group so that they know where they are and they know where to improve. And the end result might be similar to manipulating behavior, but the whole idea is that it has to be for the thing that the individual or the team that's getting the measurement in order for it to be effective. If it's for management only, then it's not. And that's like puppet strings manipulation versus a mirror. And think about fitness trackers. People wear these fitness trackers. They do it because they get data that helps them to be better, more fit. But imagine if your boss said, we're going to give you $1,000 if you have 10,000 steps every day for 30 days straight. You're going to tie that fitness tracker to the ceiling fan or the puppy dog stand, and so it loses its effect. And so it really has to be for the individual in that case, or for a team, or for a set of teams, a business unit. The thing it has to be for is essentially for improvement. But that's only one of the 3 ways that I actually think measurement is important. It's to help you improve. That's one of the key ways. That's the first way. The second way is to help you improve the program. So cybersecurity folks have gone around saying for years, this is a good practice. This is a good practice. Well, I tried all those good practices at Comcast and I measured them. And some of them are not good practices. Some of them actually are negative impact on reduction in vulnerabilities in production. And some of them are just not worth, the juice is not worth the squeeze. The practice, the cost of doing the practice is greater than the value you get out of it, and you should do other things. And so it also prioritizing that feedback allowed you to say, well, this is obviously the least effort and the most valuable thing. Let's do that first for everybody. And so the feedback on the program you use, the recommendations you make to each individual development team, that's the reason number 2 for metrics. And then reason number 3 is to get executive sponsorship. If I couldn't show that the teams that had been through my program had 1/6 as many vulnerabilities in production, I wouldn't have gotten the funding to expand to the next round of teams next year. And so especially in an enterprise situation, you have to measure in order to show that you're doing the right thing, that you're making progress.
I like the last point is proving track record, measurements, and buy-in, and fundamentally demonstrating what good looks like, but with data, backed by data. Because as you said, a lot of the best practice, and I'm air quoting this, is kind of security mythology, I would say.
Right. Anecdote, folklore, myth. Yes.
Yeah.
Mythbusters is really what the message is for.
And I think security professional has kind of talked about it over the years, and a story has become kind of truth if you repeat it enough time.
And it might have been a good practice pre-DevOps. I mean, if you have a mindset of gating and policing anyway, then some practices fit that model. But if you're trying to shift left and you have a lot of those practices that fit the gating model, the external gating, not in the pipeline gating. I'm a big fan and recommend in the pipeline gating. I don't recommend another team gating your work, if you're a development team. And so a lot of times you just have to sort of recognize that the context has changed. And you have to do something different with a different context.
This episode is brought to you by the generosity of AppSec Phoenix Ltd. AppSec helps startups and enterprises solve complex software security problems by using smart data aggregation and complex machine learning software. Discover how AppSec Phoenix helps CISO and developers remove friction and maximize the use of DevSecOps professionals at www.appsecphoenix.com. AppSec Phoenix is the new and smart dev-first way to manage your software vulnerability. Follow the tag #AppSecSmart.
Larry, hold on a second. How are we going to measure our SLA adoption, and how are we going to spend all the money and effort and time that we have put in SLAs? That will be the question that a lot of folks will ask.
Yeah, so I'm a little hyperbolic on this meeting. I don't really mean what I'm about to say completely, but it catches people's attention, and it is mostly true. From the development team's perspective, in particular, basically, I say that the only SLA that matters is one day. If you can't resolve the vulnerability the same day that it's found, then the cost of resolving it goes up exponentially over time. And so you really want to stop trying to focus on gathering a complete picture of all your vulnerabilities. That's not important. That's not the bottleneck. It's rapidly fixing them. That's the bottleneck. That's what needs the focus. And so just throw away all of the high severity and medium severity and low severity vulnerabilities. Just ignore them, drop them on the floor. Just focus on the critical. And if you can't resolve all the criticals in a single sprint as a development team, focus on a subset of the criticals. Basically, I want you to pick a smallest slice as you can to be able to commit to resolving that in 1 to 3 sprints. And once you resolve those, then change your tooling such that you block anything of those categories ever again in the future. And so the whole idea is to get into this, work the backlog down for this small policy dial setting to 0, then lock that policy dial in with a merge blocker in your pull request, and then keep turning that policy dial up over time. If you do this in about a year and a half, just about every development team we coached got to super high levels of maturity and got to this 1/6 as many vulnerabilities in production.
Oh, and that's great. But on the other hand, you have SRE team, you have patching team, you have other teams that participate, and getting all of them on board sometimes can be challenging. And the second aspect that I really love about what we discuss is measuring everything and demonstrate success and track record success. So SLA is not the only way to measure resolution time, right? There are other metrics and other things that, how would you build how would you build, or how would you suggest to the folks that are listening to build a case for fast fixing or demonstrating fundamentally that the methodology works?
Well, I guess it depends on where the organization is. Now, if the organization has been successful in the past with a external gating, policing, auditing approach, where SLAs are actually being followed, that there isn't a ton of exceptions to the SLAs, then that's a different bucket. But that's not what I see most of the time. Most of the time, I see security folks yelling into the wind, saying the SLA is this, and the team's ignoring them. And if that's the case, then I think my approach is the best way to get them to be in compliance with the SLA. Basically, start with just a small slice, commit to getting them to zero within a 1 to 3 sprints, and keep turning up the dial. Eventually, the dial will be turned up so that everything is less than a day. All the criticals, all the high severity ones, all the medium severity ones. Not very often you get to low severity ones. But all of those mediums, criticals, and highs all get to zero, and they get resolved the day that they're found. So if you are an organization that has been successful with SLAs, and you actually are really in compliance with them, and a lot of times the compliance folks think that the teams are in compliance and they're hiding the 4 bad apps and they're only showing the good app to the security group. And the only reason they're showing the good app is because the security group found it, because it was something they discovered. If you really are in compliance though, with your SLAs, then I would just say, well, just notch the critical one down to 1 day. See what happens, and coach teams that you have to resolve criticals the day that they're found, and then say, okay, now you have to resolve highs the day that they're found. And this is going to feel like a burden to the security folks, but actually to the development team, it's like, okay, now I have permission to change our pipeline, so we block the merge request with high severity ones. Now I have a mandate from security to go do this, so I can override product saying, hey, we got to ship production. So now I have to balance these two, and politics will sort of determine which one you do.
And how would you bring your management team into this guided and evolution approach to support the effective initiative?
So management team, high level, meta metrics, macro metrics sort of help with that. And I have a set of visualizations that work for executives and a slightly different set that work for business unit leaders. And I use that to sort of say, hey, your teams are doing really great, or hey, your teams are doing really great on these 3 things, but they're doing really bad on these 7 things. What can we do? Can we put together a plan to get them doing good on these other 7 things? And then, but for the most part, what the biggest resistance is not the executive and sort of business unit level, management level. They're like 9 times out of 10, they're like, yeah, we support you. Go do it. Let's do it. And so the big resistance is really at a level lower than that. It's really at the product owner or product manager, the folks that are closest to the development team, the folks that determine the backlog that gets worked on in the next sprint. And so I have a really great trick. You want to hear about this trick? I have a really great trick for getting those people. This was one of the biggest discoveries I had during launching and scaling the program at Comcast. We had teams commit to adopting 1 to 3 practices every 90 days who joined the program, and we only had a 40-some% success rate with the things they committed to adopting actually achieving it. And when we analyze it, almost all of the reasons that they didn't achieve it was because the product owner wouldn't let them spend time on modifying the pipeline, do that or whatever. They said, the things. So I actually then stopped doing the meetings without the product owner in the room. So we required that the product owner, a product manager, a business person, the person who set the backlog, and they have different titles at different organizations, and even within the same organization, at different teams, they had to be in the room. And if they didn't show up, we canceled the meeting and we let the development team go, and we rescheduled it. And so they were like, okay, fine, I'll show up, but I'll do email in the corner. And they would do that. They would do email in the corner. And And as we're talking, you're seeing the team get enthusiastic about what the practice is. How do you install software composition analysis tools in the pipeline? How do you gate at the pull request merge decision? And the team starts to get excited. They're like, yeah, let's do that. Yeah, that's the right thing to do. That's the way other teams are doing it. Let's do that. Yeah. And then the product owner in the corner is like, wait a second. What did you just commit to doing? And they start paying attention. and then at the end of the meeting, I go around the room and a team has to pick 1 to 3 things they're going to turn one shade of green darker in the next 90 days, which means basically improve it a significant notch in my model. And so I go around the room and I ask everyone in the room, do you support this plan? This 1 to 3 things you're committing to. And support means that you'll do everything in your power to see that the team achieves its goals. And I start with the product people in the room. I say, do you support this plan? And I'm taking notes and I'm recording who said what, right? So they know there's going to be a report. Yeah, accountability, because that works on business people and product people. And often they say, no, that's too much. We got these features we committed to. I committed to my boss and they committed to their boss. We got to get them out this quarter. And I'm like, well, could we modify about this plan so that you would support it? Well, let's not do those 3 things. Let's only do 2 of those 3. And let's not do it for all of our apps. Let's just do it for these 3 key apps. And I'm like, oh, team, are you okay with that modification of the commitment, the plan? Okay, great. And I basically pre-negotiate the commitment with the product owner during that. And then I keep following up. The coach who's assigned to that team keeps following up over the 90 days to make it happen. The success rate for commitments went from 40-some% to 93% after we started requiring the product people to be in the room when the team made the commitment.
I like that. I like the working together, because I've seen a lot of transformation that start from the bottom, but then get choked or get cut at the head, if you want. So without involving the business people, the transformation, everybody from a dev team get excited, but then you don't get the commitment up level, and you don't get the time to actually implementing, because ultimately is, as I like to say, is a risk trade-off. Is what risk do you want to introduce versus how much time do you want to spend reducing those kind of risk, opportunity, vulnerability, call it whatever you want. But you need to bring.
Product owners really balance risk well. I mean, they get sort of sucked into these meetings where they have to commit to roadmap, and that drives them. They made a commitment. They're going to do it. They're going to accept the risk, and they really aren't making good risk evaluations when it's too emotional to them. And so I think you need this sort of external force to sort of get them to look at that particular risk. And I'm talking about the people at the lowest levels. The higher level business unit leaders and executives generally do evaluate risk better. That's a characteristic, I think, of getting promoted is that you actually are better at evaluating risks and thinking 3 steps ahead instead of just for now.
But you still need the middle management to drive those transformation forward, because they are the gating, or there could be the gating process of a process like this, or the actually green light process.
Correct. Yeah. Right. So you don't even get into meet the team unless the manager is basically, we're going to do this. My other business unit owner, peer of mine, has already gotten ahead of me, and now we have a contest going. In fact, that's part of my program. It with these metrics, right? We have a contest going, and the loser of the contest has to wear a bunny suit during Easter week. We actually had that happen. I had 2.
I want to see the picture.
They know they wouldn't allow me to take any pictures and put that in the record, but I can't even say who the 2 business units are. But yeah, one of the business unit leaders challenged the other business unit leader, the one with the most improvement in the next 90 days, the loser of that, the least of that had to wear. And that just got a lot of attention. That just gamified it, made it fun for everyone. And although you did have some developers say, hey, we're going to sandbag, so our leader is the one who has to wear the bunny suit. But that didn't actually happen. They actually tried hard to make it happen, So.
No, that's encouraging the wrong behavior.
Right. Have you seen the Dilbert where he says, they say, the manager says, we're gonna pay you $500 for every bug. And Dilbert immediately gets up and starts walking out of the room. I might have this a little bit wrong. And the manager's like, where are you going? He's like, Dilbert's like, I'm going to go write myself a minivan before lunch. So.
Nice. So measurement is key. Management involvement is key. If now that we're coming towards the time, if you can leave everybody with kind of a key takeaway, which one would be the top 3 kind of things that you will encourage giving our audience in if they want to move towards a better maturity level? What practice will they adopt, or which methodology would they adopt?
Yeah, I think mindset is probably the first place. So I'm going to give you one mindset of the 3, and then I'll give you 2 other things, the category. The first mindset is stop thinking that developers don't care about security. That is absolutely not true. I have never found that to be true. You might find a handful of them here and there, but every individual development team has at least one person who cares about engineering excellence. And for the most part, the majority of the engineers on every development team care about engineering excellence. And they absolutely know that if their product gets hacked, that is a sign that they aren't excellent engineers, and they don't ever want that to happen. And so you have to hook that desire for engineering excellence. And that's the hook you use to sort of get them to care about security in a way that sort of aligns with you, the way you as a security person care about security. The second thing is you have to think of this. So that's number 1. Number 2, you asked for 3 takeaways. Number 2 is you have to think of every individual team as on a separate spot in the journey to maturity. If you try to sort of like blanket, like policy your way out into this, you'll never get there, because every team is at a different starting point. Every team has a different context and different issues. And so you really need to coach every individual team. And then the third thing, and these all lead to each other, is this idea of coaching. And so you have to have a coach. You have to hire coaches. And the kind of person I mean by a coach is not someone who used to be a security auditor, because they're just used to, or a pen tester, they're just used to telling development teams their baby's ugly all day long. I'm talking about a Ted Lasso kind of coach. Ted Lasso is the name of a character in a TV series by Apple Plus. And if you haven't seen it, you should really go see it. He is hired to coach. He's an American football, that oblong shaped thing for you Europeans.
Yeah,
American football coach.
Not done here in Europe.
Not done here in Europe.
Right.
Who's hired to coach a European football team. He knows nothing about European football. He knows nothing about soccer, as we call it here in the States. But you know what he knows about? He knows about getting the best thing out of individuals. He knows how to get a team to work together. He knows how to get a team all aligned and working in the same direction. And so he uses those skills. And that's what you need. You need to stop being the police and the gatekeepers. You need to hire people that are going to be coaches and work with individual teams. By the way, this scales very nicely. People go, I can't talk to every individual team. We'll go nuts. We don't have enough staff. Well, think about this. It's a 90-minute workshop every 90 days that the coach has to perform. If you do 10 of these a week, 90-minute workshops, you're still only up to 15 hours a week. That still leaves you another, 20 hours a week plus of time to do other things. And there's 10 weeks in a quarter. Well, there's really 13, but you have vacation and stuff like that. So 10 workshops a week times 10 weeks in a quarter, one coach can handle 100 development teams using this framework that I'm talking about.
No, and that's, I think those are 3 kind of key points that points back to a change in kind of mindset and mentality, because I think that's what's missing. That's you hit the nail on the coffin, together with measurement and getting drive and getting measurement around everything that you do as a practice, and self-imposed kind of based on the measurement, self-imposed kind of objective. That is where I like team to be. But coaching, data, and different mindset are the three kind of key elements that I keep on banging from. And I think sometimes we agree and disagree.
Well, if I had to put a meta message under this, it would be measure everything. I mean, you can't do any of what I said without having the measurement to show that it's effective. You need the measurement to actually help the team improve. You have to measure their adoption of practices. You have to measure their success rate on the commitments they make. That's sort of very process kind of measurement. And then you have to measure their median time to resolve for vulnerabilities. So measurement is sort of an underlying concept of everything. So I agree with you there. It's probably the most important thing, actually.
Yes. All right, brilliant. Larry, if you want to leave as well, we have a tradition here on the podcast that we like to wrap up the whole conversation with a positive message. I guess we give 3 takeaways. Now let's give a positive message that this is doable, and this is.
Well, I guess the positive message is that any organization, no matter how large, no matter the compliance situation, I have done this for any organization can start on the path to DevSecOps and get there. It's a multi-year journey for larger organizations. It took me 5 years at Comcast to get halfway there. And halfway is even a little generous because I only had half the teams in the program, but some of them hadn't been in the program very long. But we had commitment after 5 years to get the other half teams. Management had decided to invest in this. And that's when I left, is basically I knew I had achieved the goal. Any organization, honestly, I really do mean this. If you think your organization is so different that you can't do this, that's wrong. Any organization can pull this off.
Right. No, that's brilliant. And for the folks that don't know you yet, where they can find you, where they can see more about the framework that you mentioned, where they can listen you speak or hear you more, give us kind of where they can find you. Where is Larry?
So my day job, I work for a tool vendor in the application security space called Contrast Security. And I do workshops, basically, like the one I described in this podcast. My side project, and Contrast is very supportive of me in doing this side project, is called transformation.dev. And we have a software product that we're in alpha on. And you could go to transformation.dev and sign up to be a beta tester when we get to beta for the software product. Basically, it's a tool that will get you on this coaching plan, this coaching pattern.
Brilliant. Folks, it's been a brilliant conversation. Larry, thank you so much for coming on the show. We always had this conversation on the side. I wanted really to bring it on because there are quite a few key points that I think anybody can benefit on. Everybody, thank you for listening in. Thank you for staying safe. And please remember that, as Larry was saying, DevSecOps is achievable. We can change our mindset, but we can also go faster, forward, better if we all collaborate together. This is Francesco, your host. Larry, thank you very much for coming on the show. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, everybody. Stay safe.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Please leave us a review on Apple Podcast and post it on social media tagging Cybersecurity Cloud Podcast for a chance to win a $100 Amazon gift card. Discover other episodes at www.cybersecuritypodcast.com.